students. Right, this is your quick overview of period 9. Now remember, period 9 is 1980 to the present. So for this, it's going to go over big concepts, right, that you might see as the ending things that happen from period 8, which was like in the 60s and 70s. And you can really see the beginning of the 80s as a rejection of some of those liberal ideas that we saw in the social movements of the 60s and 70s. So let's go through it. Right, again, this is going to be a brief overview of a lot of stuff. Right, so focus on big themes. Right, so the president of the 80s will be Ronald Reagan. He will be president for 2 terms. Right, and with Reagan, we have the rise of the ideas of conservatism. Right, so the conservative Republican Party here, right, the Republican conservatives would be called the New Right. Right, and he's extremely popular. This is his electoral map in 1980. All right, so totally, he wins almost every state here. Right, very, very popular. Right, in 1984, his electoral map looks almost the same. Right, again, very, very popular president when he is running for these re-elections. Right, now, what are the things that him and his conservative ideas? What are we doing with these ideas? Right, what are the things that he's going to talk about? We're going to see this on a couple slides here. So economically pro-business, right? This is a trend we still see with the Republican Party today, right? Pro-business all the way. Definitely the idea that the private sector or business is who should be in charge of a lot of things, right? This new right, hence it's new, right, is because they're going to be this moral majority, right, is what they're going to call themselves. Remember, this used to be the silent majority with Nixon. So it's the same group of people, now moral majority. When we think of morals, things that are culturally correct, right? And so this religious and moral conservative ideas are a reaction to what we saw with feminism, the hippies, and gay liberation of the 60s and 70s, right? And so because he wins with all these such large numbers, it's kind of like this idea that they are society as a whole is rejecting some of those liberal ideas we were seeing in the 60s and 70s, right? Because these are all these people voting and they're voting for this guy, right? So these ideas is kind of like affirmation that these ideas are what the country wants, right? And so with this moral majority, he is going to be, when he's president for his 8 years, will appoint 4 Supreme Court justices, right? And they're going to roll back a lot of state laws and regulations when it comes to Roe v. Wade and affirmative action. Right? So with Reagan, all right, one of the things he's known for is Reaganomics, right? So think about it. You have an economic idea and you put your name on it, right? So definitely something we see with several Republican presidents after this, right? So Bush #2, so that's George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, both are going to use the supply side economic theory, right, to kind of promote a lot of their economic agendas, right? So this is supply side economics or Reaganomics, those 2 words are interchangeable, is a rejection of Keynesian economic theory, right? Keynesian economic theory, we talked about that with the New Deal with FDR, and what that is the idea that the government needs to spend money in order to make money, right? Help us out during the Great Depression, things like that, right? So we see this spending on social programs by the federal government in the 1930s with the New Deal and in the 1960s with the Great Society, right? Reaganomics is a rejection of those ideas, okay, right? It is mostly seen with a large tax cut for the wealthy, right? So a 20% tax cut, this is for large corporations and the wealthy, and the idea is, all right, trickle down economics. So this is the idea, right? So on paper, this sounds like a good idea. So we'll go through the process. If you have a big business or have a lot of money and you have a tax cut, that means up here, right, your little tax cut you have, well, it's a big tax cut, right? You're going to then take that extra money you have and reinvest it in your business. So then your business can expand, it can hire more people, those people will have more money, right? And then they'll be able to buy more things. And this will improve the economy. So it trickles down to everyone. Well, check out this cartoon over here, right? This cartoon, you have Reagan, right? And it is a fountain, but the fountain's odd. It's going the opposite direction. They usually fountain small on the top and then the water trickles over, right? Well, this is the idea that these tax cuts are going mostly to the wealthy, and it's not necessarily trickling down to the middle class or the poor. So there are little fishies over here like, where's the water? Where's it coming from, right? There is no water, right? Because there's nothing in these ideas that say if you're rich or have a big company, that you have to do that with your extra money. You could just use it and go buy a fancy car or a new house if you want to, right? Or another yacht or something. So this on paper sounds like a good idea, right? But it is not going to come down to all the rest of us, right? And so this is going to be a policy we're going to see continue on in other Republican presidents, right? And unfortunately, the same thing happens. So these ideas are helping the economy in one way, but it is not benefiting the majority of Americans, right? It's only benefiting those large corporations or that top group of people, right? And so another thing that goes along with his economic plan is he's going to be cutting federal spending on social programs, specifically food stamps and welfare. Over the terms of his presidency, $42 billion is cut from these programs. However, he's not just cutting spending money all over the place. He also spending tons of money on the military, over $150 billion over his term, right? So that idea of like, well, we're cutting money here, and we're spending a whole lot more over here, right? When we are running a deficit, that means a debt every year. It's a $20 to $30 billion deficit, right? And it's all mostly due to military buildup, military spending. So here's this cartoon up here, right? Reagan's in the front. He has the tax cuts. That's what people are paying attention to, right? And the people are like, oh, this is fine. Look, that young guy, he's off there cutting our grass. This is great, right? But they're not paying attention to what's happening in the backyard, right? Of all of this spending on military buildup, right? So again, the people are kind of distracted, if you will, right, by the tax cuts, because that's what they see right now. They're not seeing what's happening behind the scenes, right? Another thing we're going to see with Reagan is he's the king of deregulation. What that means is that businesses are not going to have a lot of rules by the federal government to stop them from doing things. Kind of in nod back to the Gilded Age before we had rules for businesses, right? And so it's the idea is that if your businesses are able to do whatever they want, then they can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Our economy can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so this is the philosophy of your economy is going to be advanced by large corporations, right? We know now, it's 2021, we know now that the majority of our economy is going to grow based on consumer spending by all of us, right? So if we're not getting tax cuts down here at the bottom, right, we're not seeing this money, we're not spending the money, and therefore the economy is only going to be being used by those large corporations and the people at the top. All the rest of us, which is the majority, aren't doing as well, right? We're just kind of maintaining, but things aren't improving, right? For his Cold War strategies, right, is he will be ending the Cold War. So that's a positive thing, but kind of not the best way to go about how he does it. Right. So first off, he's going to be using a lot of rhetoric. So that means you're speaking and everything like that. Lots of speeches against the Soviet Union. He calls them the evil empire. This is your main enemy. Calling them names of the evil empire may not be the best suggestion to have. All right. But that's what he does. And we'll have the Reagan doctrine. Remember, we saw Truman doctrine, Eisenhower doctrine. Reagan's like, I need one too. However, his is still going to be fighting communism, but it's going to change a little bit. Right? We're going to support any regime that is anti-communist, even if they're a bad guy, right? Even if they're a dictator, even if they treat their people really badly, we don't care. They're anti-communist, so we are going to be buddies with them. Not the best plan, but yeah, right? One of those particular places, we do this in a lot of places, but one of them in particular is going to be in Nicaragua. Nicaragua, they are going to be having a communist regime, right? The people fighting against these communists are going to be the Contras, right? So this is going to be your anti-communists are going to be your Contras, right? And then we have this event called the Iran-Contra affair, right? And Iran-Contra affair, to make it really simplistic, okay, is that we are going to be selling weapons to Iran, right? And we're going to make a profit off of selling those weapons. And then we're going to use that money and to fund the anti-communists over in Nicaragua, the Contras. This is illegal because Congress said, no, you can't give money to the people of Nicaragua, right, to fight communism, right? And since Congress said no, and you're bypassing them, and they're the ones in charge of appropriation of money, that is illegal. However, in all the investigations, nothing could really stick to Reagan, so he is nicknamed the Teflon president. So think in like your kitchen, the nonstick pans, the nonstick card is called Teflon, right? So it's this idea nothing stuck to him, right? Also, kind of a side note here, Reagan was an actor before he got into politics. So he's an actor, then he became governor of California, then became president, right? And so he knows how to kind of work the media, right? He knows how to kind of, set the scene, right, from his background in movies, right? So he's able to kind of manipulate sort of what's going on to make him always look like the right person at the right time, right? With all that money we talked about they're spending on the military, here's where we're spending a lot of this money, right? And we're doing this, sorry, there's a typo there, right? My bad. But one of the things we're going to do, it's going to be SDI, right, which is the Strategic Defense Initiative, right? And what it is that we are going to have satellites in space that will have lasers, right? Lasers in space, that if the Soviets shoot a weapon at us, we will be able to boom it out of the sky with a laser. I don't believe we have the tech and lasers now to do that. So this is kind of like a far-fetched sci-fi fantasy happening here. Due to this, critics of SDI and the expense that went with it will nickname it Star Wars because some of the Star Wars movies came out in the 80s. So we got our little cartoon here that his crack team of experts are helping him with the project, and we have some Star Wars characters, and you got to throw ET in there because, that's the 80s as well. Right. Now, how much are we spending with stuff like Star Wars, right? Back in 1981, he is spending $170 billion. 4 years later, he's spending $300 billion, right? Billions and billions and billions of dollars, and this is annual amounts of money, right? Now, with all of this money we're spending, obviously, we're spending a lot of money on things that aren't really going to come to fruition, but the Soviet Union is still trying to kind of keep up an arms race with us, and they can't keep up. And so this is going to cause the USSR to become bankrupt, and this will lead them to then the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89, and then the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, and the breakup of the Soviet bloc, right? After 1991, we refer to it as Russia now. So even though all this spending is happening, and there's a lot of questions about, I say, so why is use of money? Right, it does in the Cold War, even though this is actually happening during the next presidency, which is Bush #1 or George H.W. Bush. Right, so kind of some pros and cons happening there. Right, now these other topics we're going to have are going to be really big encompassing things. Right, and so we have 21st century economy, right, and all of this stuff is dealing with globalization, right, computers, right, and where are we seeing jobs increasing, where are we seeing jobs decreasing? Right, so globalization, right, you guys know what this is. It means that you can go to almost any country in the world and find a Starbucks and find a McDonald's, right? And the idea where we are now a global economy, right? We cannot stay isolated anymore, right, in anything in the future because we are so interconnected, right? Think about all the things you can buy on Amazon, right? Hey, that is just like screaming globalization. Right, the digital revolution is when we're using the computers and the internet, right? Obviously, the 90s, we started getting computers like this. This is an old Apple IIgs, right? I used to have one. They didn't do it, right? But when we start having these personal computers, they are meant for business, right? We are not seeing social media until the 2000s, right? And actually, like mid 2000s, right? So the beginning here, it's just for business to help out with that. Obviously, once we have social media, that's then going to influence all things like politics, society, etc. But that's not going to be until like 2005 to 2008, right? So Obama's election in 2008, he uses social media to help with his campaign. First time we ever see that, but that's kind of a new topic, right? We're seeing decline in manufacturing jobs because we're outsourcing everything to China, right? And other countries as well, but China's the main one, right? Also with this, since you know manufacturing, right, you're not going to have as many unions, right, in the United States, right? And also Reagan during the 80s broke up lots of unions because, again, he's pro-business, right? One of those particular unions was there was this giant airline union that was going on strike to get better pay, better hours, and that sort of thing. And he fired them all and broke up the union, right? So, yeah. We're seeing an increase in service sector type of jobs, right? So my job, I'm providing a service for you, right? Lawyers, provider service, food services, right? These types of things where you're not actually making a product, right? You're not making something, right? You're providing a service. So manufacturing, you're making a product, something you can actually tangibly touch and have, right? A service is when you're providing some sort of idea that you are providing a thing for someone else, but it is not a tangible item. Okay? Okay. All of this, along with the tax cuts we saw from the 80s, is causing an income gap. Right? This income gap, right, is just as bad in the early 2000s as it was in the 1920s before the Great Depression. Right? That income gap, right, is going to kind of hit a bubble in 2008. Right? And that's when we have the Great Recession of 2008. It's going to turn into a depression because of all those things FDR set up in the New Deal. Right? So, but this income gap, if we looked at charts, which we did in class, all right, back with our stations on the Great Depression, right, there was a chart and it had what the income gap was in the 1920s, what it was in the early 2000s, and it's almost identical. Right? And so that is mostly due to this idea where the 1%, those very wealthy people, are getting richer and richer and richer, and all the rest of us kind of are back here at the same level. Okay. For migration during this time period and immigration, so remember, migration's inside your country, immigration is coming from outside your country into your country. Right? So internal migration, we have air conditioning throughout the country, and now it is more affordable. Right? Okay, so when I was a kid, long ago, right? We only had those air conditioning units you put into your window because they were kind of expensive to have like the actual whole unit for air conditioning in your house, right? They became more affordable as the years go on. Might have just been that my parents were kind of cheap at the time, but you know. But now with that affordable AC, people are now moving even more so to your Sun Belt, right, which is all down here, right, on our map. And they're leaving the Rust Belt, right, which is your Great Lakes states, okay, right? So the Great Lakes states, remember, that's where a lot of manufacturing is, hence the Rust Belt is why it's called that, right? And so you have less manufacturing jobs, right? And so there's more, you know, AC in jobs down in the South. So a lot of people are migrating to that part of the country, right? Again, California, Texas, all the way over here to Georgia, right? In your 90s and 2000s, we have a lot of immigration from Asia, right, and also from Latin America, right, and we still have this nativist trend, not the same nativists we had back in the 1800s, but anti-immigrant groups that we're going to call as a whole this nativist idea, right, is going to say that people are taking American jobs. Well, unfortunately, these are either jobs that Americans refuse to do, agricultural jobs, right, or aren't qualified to do. Think of medical jobs, right? We have a lot of people from in many parts of the world that come to the United States who are doctors. Not everybody's going to be a doctor, right? And if you're a doctor, I'm pretty sure you're good on the front, right? And our last topic we have here, and again, all of this is kind of real big overview pictures, challenges to the 21st century. Right? Our first challenge, we have the election of 2000, closest election ever in history. And again, another typo I'm seeing on here. Don't worry about, sorry about that. But here's our electoral map for 2000. This is Bush versus Gore. Look at that electoral vote. Ooh, that is super close, right? It comes down to the state of Florida. We did not know who won that state. It ends up going to a Supreme Court case, Bush versus Gore, right, where the Supreme Court will finally, after several recounts of the state of Florida, which it was a margin of 3,000 votes for that one state, right, decided that finally, after several recounts, that those electoral votes were going to be awarded to Bush, and then he won the presidency, right? However, the popular vote was won by Al Gore, right? This is the first time this has happened since 1877, right, 1876, and then the Compromise of 1877, where we end Reconstruction. That was the last time we had an electoral crisis, if you will, right? So we have this here in 2000. It is very rare, and it kind of shocked people, right? To have it again in 2016 of a different person winning the electoral vote versus the popular vote is extremely unusual, right? So it's one of those things where now it starts people question about the validity of using the electoral college, and was that, you know, something that the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, did they mean for that to be kept forever, or is it meant to be changed? Something still to talk about even today. Right? September 11th, 2001 is when we had the terrorist attacks in New York City and also at the Pentagon, right? And this is going to then launch us into this new ideas of a global war on terrorism, right? So we have the war in Afghanistan, which is from 2001, directly connected from this, right? And it was just announced about 2 weeks ago. President Biden said that their goal is by September of 2021, so this September, which will be the 20th anniversary of September 11th that we will be going to pulling out the last of the American troops out of Afghanistan. There's only about 3,500 troops there right now. So a goal, hopefully that works, but again, we'll see in the future, see what's going on. Another conflict we're going to see with this is going to be the war in Iraq, so 2003 to 2011, right? And that was to remove Saddam Hussein from power, right? He was doing some really bad things to the people in his country, killing the Kurds in northern Iraq, right? Horrible, horrible things. And there was the idea we thought he was hiding weapons of mass destruction. There's no proof that we found any of these things, but we know that he was using them against his own people, like chemical warfare and things like that. So definitely some controversy on how we got in there since we didn't find these weapons of mass destruction, but we know that he was bad dude. Okay. From the war on terror in general, we are going to have Patriot Acts, right? And the Patriot Acts in a simplistic form are going to allow the federal government to have more surveillance on U.S. citizens, right? So that means that if you are doing something bad on the internet, right, the FBI, CIA, they have access to this, right? They can get anything they want off of your phone, right, according to the Patriot Act, because it is for national security, right? A lot of people question this as, are we allowing citizens to actually have their rights of freedom of speech and things like that? Or is this to protect us, all right, this Patriot Act, right, looking at our phones, or is this something bad, all right? So civil liberties are definitely questioned at this time, right? We'll also create a new department in the cabinet, which is the Department of Homeland Security, right? And so we all are pretty familiar with that. They're the ones who are doing stuff at the airports, this and that, right? Again, to protect this Homeland Security due to threat of terrorism at a global level, right? Also during the 21st century, we're seeing issues with the environment, right? So back in the early 90s, we had the Persian Gulf War, and it really shows that we have this dependence on foreign oil. By the way, that's also Saddam Hussein, right? So same guy there, right? And then over here, when he leaves the country of Kuwait that he invaded, he was like, well, if I can't have the oil, no one can. And he burned all of the oil wells, and that's going to cause massive pollution. You can see the fires from space, pretty intense stuff. But again, this idea that we're realizing, yes, we depend on foreign oil, right, to run our everyday lives. And then we start to see in the 2000s, Al Gore, back rank president up here, right, is going to be giving us warnings, working with scientists, right, putting out documentaries and things like that about climate change. Not everyone in the United States embraces the ideas that we have climate change, and this actually becomes politicized, right? And politicized meaning that you have Democrats are saying that yes, this climate change is caused by humans, right, in our interactions with the environment. Republicans are more saying that climate change is a natural phenomenon, right, where you have ebbs and flows of the climate going throughout the centuries. I'm not a scientist, but we all can kind of make our own decisions on that we do play a huge role in things. If we're having giant fires, we made those fires, right? They're probably not a good thing, right? So this is all I have for you guys on what is happening here with period 9, right? I realize it's a really quick overview. There are a ton of videos on the internet for you guys also to watch, but again, this is a huge kind of like big topics for period 9, right? Not really specific things of like this person, that person, but like big overarching topics. So hopefully this was helpful, right? See you guys at our next review, right? Which is going to be tomorrow, right? And see you guys later, right? If you got questions, as always, send them my way, all right? And I will try my best